Hey y'all. It's the last Tuesday of November, 28th November, 2023. This is Gimbalabs Playground. And we had a little change of plans today. We were going to talk about Mesh PBL, but the team there, we've been building and kind of creating systems and starting to create content. And we realized we wouldn't have enough new stuff to share in 2 weeks to bother doing two separate sessions. So we're just going to consolidate all of that 2 weeks from now. I think that's December 12th for a Mesh PBL presentation at Playground. And so I woke up this morning like all worried about what we were going to do at Playground today. But I found a message from Curtis in the chat saying, we got to talk about how we're training AI to help set up Andamio. And a Playground session would be good. So I was like, how about today? And so thanks for coming through, man. Last minute to be here. But yeah, so I know that's not as much time to prepare a conversation, but I also know that you've been experimenting, and I love ideas when they're half baked. Henneman. So yeah, to jump in, see your work in progress today, and see where the conversation takes us sounds really exciting to me. How's it going?
Pretty good, busy. I'm sure every community around is working on many things at once and just trying to wrangle in priorities. Same here, no different than anybody else. Enjoying the process as we go. It's quite fun.
So have you written a chat bot to help you prioritize yet?
I no, I've actually been using some of the existing chatbots that do that to help me with roadmap, and I do find right agents are best when they're built with a specific purpose versus just a generalized. So ChatGPT itself isn't as good as maybe an agent that's built to do this specific thing. And yes, absolutely, a life coach, right? I think that's coming soon for many people. Hey, I just need my personal assistant to help me out through the day. Uh,
I love it. Cool. Well, so we talked recently about seeing what could happen if we try to like feed some of the Andamio, um, try to build an out. What are we talking about? Building a model to support people understanding Andamio?
See, I'm hoping that it can actually provide a few feedback, like be used for a few different reasons. One is it is meant to be an expert at Ondamio. So if you have a question on how to use it, you're a developer or a course creator, and maybe you're not a developer, you can use this agent to really guide you through that documentation and even pull out what they need. So they're able to ask the documentation specific questions. It will navigate to it, find it, give them the answer. I did structure the prompt framework to really guide them through it. So it's not just a conversational chatbot, but it actually has a series of objectives. And I got that from a lot of the information that you had. So starting out with the introduction and getting started and so on and so forth, it will attempt to guide them through that by assessing their level of knowledge. So if they're familiar with Ondamio, it's going to kind of streamline through it. If they're not, then it's going to step them through it step by step. And it will prompt them to gather that information. Like, where are you at? What's your expertise level, your knowledge level? And then that's how it's going to communicate with it, with the user. So yeah, the intent is really just build out courses, but also teach them more about Ondamio. I did try to add to its knowledge base the student learning targets and the big whys. And so it's not just, hey, technical documentation. It's why do you use project-based learning versus this traditional method of educating, learners. So I'm hoping that we can continue to expand on its knowledge base and give it a bit more of the big picture so it knows how to communicate a little bit better. But we're working on that. I hope to get with you on an export maybe of some of the documentation that you have.
Awesome.
That's the intent.
While you were saying it, this might be a thought for later, but just to pin it, um, I really like what you're saying about the agent meeting people where they are, and even it's assessing, right? It's deciding what to teach next because of the data it's gathering. And we have this concept, it's in the Plutus PBL course, but it's going to end up in any course that chooses to go with the learning target approach. that some learning targets are directly accessible because maybe they even create an on-chain artifact, right? Any learning target that says I can interact with a smart contract or build this transaction obviously is going to create an on-chain artifact if you're able to do those things. And for those, that artifact could even be the credential. And other times, maybe it's a Git event or in-person event, right? Presenting at Playground, that could be a learning target, right? I can facilitate a conversation is one that we've talked about in some of the sociocracy work. Those are measurable by other people, and you can collect data about that. But there's a whole bunch of learning targets that are only there so that the learner is encouraged to self-assess. They're never going to create an on-chain artifact. They're never even going to create a public artifact of any kind. The one from the beginning of the Plutus PBL course is, I know how to safely store my keys, right? There's no artifact. There's only anti-artifacts for that one, right? If you don't and you get caught, we're all going to know, right? But in terms of, can I know for sure that Curtis knows how to safely store his private keys? No, he probably does, right? But I can't assess that. And so for things like that, those learner-facing learning targets, I can imagine an agent like this being a really interesting thing to employ, just like to coach people to say, hey, did you learn that thing? Maybe, yeah, if you learned this thing, maybe here's how you might know.
Yeah, I like that.
Cool. So one thing to maybe come back to. So maybe to frame this, one thing I really like about the conversations we end up having here is we often start with like a look at like the technical details, just to give everybody kind of a shared frame. And that can kind of ignite curiosity and give us all better questions to ask. Would you mind giving us just a little demo of how you construct an agent like this and what it looks like to feed it data and what kind of decisions you have to make?
Absolutely. You cut out for a second for me. I think it was my internet. It's
Oh,
saying it's my internet. So I think what I heard was you're asking to demo the construction of the agent.
yeah,
Okay, perfect.
thanks.
Absolutely. Let me pull that screen up. Now, what may actually shock you guys is how simple it really is to get started using ChatGPT and deploying your own custom GPTs. This is the interface for interacting with it, but I'm going to edit it to show you some of the backend stuff. They've really built out a good flow if you don't know how to generate your own GPTs or really what you're supposed to build into it. It has a conversational agent. This agent is responsible for crafting and building your agent for you. So it starts with your intent and what are you trying to do, and it goes back and forth. And at the end of the conversation, it builds out the configuration. So it provides a name, it even generates the art for it, generates the description and instructions and conversation starters, which you see over here. These are just examples of things that the user can interact with. What are the key elements of a PBL course? Can you help me outline my course content? So on and so forth, which we can generate and control those questions if we wanted to. In use it, I typically don't use this interaction because it generalizes. It's like having a conversation with ChatGPT. You tell it something and it sort of summarizes it and tries to capture your intent. So when it builds it out, the instructions tend to be vague in a way. So I intentionally crafted these to give me a bit more of the tone and responses that we're looking for. And then I also gave it a list of objectives to make sure that it's addressing these. The user doesn't have to to address these. It is trying to confirm that it's communicating appropriately to the user themselves. Where the power truly comes in is this upload files. I did grab the white paper, and inside that document is some of your documentation for the Andamio course. And that's all in a single file. So it's able to use that as its knowledge base and reference. So when it's doing its objectives, it's going to constantly reference its knowledge base for that content, for that material, as well as communication style and so on and so forth. Um, that's where I want to expand it on. I don't have the full Andamio guide that you have, like the course for the Andamio course. That needs to be uploaded. I have some SLT components in there, but I'd like to expand on that. So as this thing grows, it becomes more and more capable or more and more accurate. And that's what I'd like to continue to do. We can even, as we iterate and go further, we can add some actions. So if this thing needs to trigger API endpoints, or maybe you can integrate Git so that everything that is shown here, you can say, all right, yeah, submit that to Git or Gitbook or some markdown. We can actually add that functionality so the agent's able to write to it. For now, it's just meant to be a conversation piece and more of like a coach where it's guiding them through, and they take whatever components they want from it and build it out. And it will actually guide them through that too, because that's in your documentation. Any questions on as far as crafting a GPT at this point? So it's pretty simple.
Can you add, how would I add like a Git code base to the knowledge base?
Yeah, so that's a good question. Agents can scrape the web. So you can give it a URL, say inside the instructions, provide it a URL and tell it what is that purpose of that URL? When do I need to use it or why use it? And it can access that information and use it, but it's not technically considered part of its knowledge base in that instance, because it has to call another function to scrape the internet, and then it'll scrape that URL and try to use that as its knowledge. But it's not fine tuned. So fine tuned, this information means I'm always aware of this. I've read it. It's now stored in my memory. A URL is saying I have to go and fetch it for it to be in my active memory. So it's generally, at least right now, I think technology is moving very fast. We're going to see new functionality soon. For right now, if you can export it into a PDF, a markdown, a text document, whatever, and then upload it directly, that's now fine tuning the model. So it's ingrained in its long-term memory. That's usually a better practice. So that is kind of a challenge. Like you're saying, it's on the web, but you need to get it into a document file that you can upload to get better results, or provide the URL inside the instructions and tell it how to reference that URL.
Oh, okay. So what this is telling me is that the getting documents into your agent's knowledge base is like a new thing, or is that curated knowledge base for the agent is key. Yeah, yeah. I'm curious.
Definitely key. Yeah. Sorry. Go
Yeah.
ahead.
Well, I'm curious what's in the like I want to look at the Andamia white paper real quick to kind of refresh.
Sure. Let me see if I can't find it. Give me a second. I
And then
remember I kind of compiled some things together.
in the instructions, the Indomitio course creator addresses users personally using their names when provided with greetings like good day name and hello. Okay, so this is like a real like figuring out how to put that in. Remains casual, coaching like with a focus on tangible, clear explanations. All right. You are an expert in the Indomio platform. You're here to guide the users. And is that's sort of, yeah, I mean, I guess you could make it in any way you want, right?
Yep. Yep. This is all, me. So there is no framework, I guess you could say. There is no specific way to do it. You
Right.
can write it however you want. I try to include certain elements of the agent, what is the tone that you speak in, and what is the type of interactions. In this case, it's coaching like, and focusing on tangible, clear explanations versus the abstract, feely, which is great, but that's not generally what you want in an Ondomio, course creator. You want to
Immediately,
actually,
I'm like, oh, you can make it abstract and feely, or like, what would
you
that be? Can
can.
you change this, and will it, if you change those, and will it immediately respond? Like, do you fine tune those instructions as you go?
You can. So it's similar to, like, you would say Git. If I make a change up here, in fact, let's do that now. If I just add a space, it goes to update. And so I'd have to publish. I can publish my changes, and I can publish them to public, or keep this bot only to those who have the link, or just me. Most of mine are in public, except for on Domio. I hadn't spoken with James yet, so I didn't want to make this a public agent.
Yeah.
But yeah, as soon as you make your change, you can keep testing it here in this screen. And then once you're done and satisfied, you update and publish that. Because you can see I have unpublished changes now.
Oh, so you can make this private to you, and then publish means so it's sort of, yeah, okay. And this is something that you get with the $20 a month ChatGPT service.
Yeah, you get access to be able to generate your GPTs, and create them. Yeah. And then even use other people's, which I can, like, one really good tool. I built one. It wasn't as good as this gentleman, so I just ditched it and went his way. But he's
Oh.
literally just a GPT that finds you the best custom GPTs that are published to the public.
Nice.
And so it'll go and find it for you, and this is really good. If you want to create an image about your dog or something, you can ask it, and it will find a GPT that's specifically trained on creating images and dogs, whatever. Yeah. It's quite
Oh,
interesting.
do one for like creating courses. Do one for like creating
um,
PPL courses, course creation, and yeah, like online course
Coach.
creation. Yeah, there
So
you go.
the verbs, the terms that you actually use is critical, because what it's doing is it's searching two fields while that searches. It's searching the description and the name. And of course, it's going to know related words, but it is important what types of words you use to search for.
Right.
But it's going to give me a list of probably 10 or so if it finds that many.
And then, yeah, who is the PBL like big name, like so you could interact with um I've been thinking a lot about Alan Kay lately, uh who is sort of an innovation guy, uh math, science, engineering. And if you had a GPT trained on all of his background, like, you can interact with a person, right? It's like you know a GPT that's like a historic figure, like a Thomas Jefferson or Martin Luther King, that you could interact with. That would be kind of cool.
You can. I think that particular use case would require a little bit more fine tuning. These, I will say, these agents are, the way they're designed as far as the framework that surrounds them, task-based agents. Let's teach it how to do something, a task. If you're looking for a conversation bot
Right.
that mimics somebody else, there's actually better tools out there that can kind of do that. But
Oh,
in this framework, you would have to. So let me, if you just go back. Sorry for going off topic,
oh
guys. I just
yeah,
love
and
this topic.
that's totally
Um,
me too. I realize now. I'm like, oh crap! I thought it was just me and you, Chad.
no
We got
worries.
other people here too.
Playground, baby. It's a
Uh,
playground.
It's the playground.
there you go. So the upload files, and this is actually something I'm planning on doing with the Ondomio agent and many of my other agents. It's a strategy that I found really helpful. When you go to upload files, if you create a text document where, let's say it's James and I just having a one-on-one conversation, and we take the transcription from that meeting, and it's just back
Right.
and forth. I can actually upload that transcript in here and inform it like, this is the communication style. These are the words that he uses to communicate. This is how he talks. And you are an agent that you are James, like that's how you tell it. You, in the instructions, you say, you are James, and here's what your purpose is, blah, blah, blah. Then you can have a conversation with it, and it references its knowledge as, here's my communication style, here's my tone, here's and of course the more you have, the more accurate it's going to be. But it's just text, it's kilobytes, so you can put quite a bit in there to get what you're talking about.
Hmm. Okay.
And
Oh,
here's
let's
a
see. Okay, so
resource.
now oh man, it's found 10 of them.
10 plus looks like some additional that didn't quite fit my description. So an AI NFT creation coach, blah, blah, blah. So these are like a little off topic, but maybe
Right,
relevant.
right.
And you got your online course creation tool, EduGuides, and their descriptions below, and then a link. So if I click this link, it's actually going to open a conversation with that agent. And now I'm
And these are all on the open AI sort of framework? Are they other?
So these are people like if this on Domio agent I have, if I hit publish to public, that's what these are. And in fact, all of these on the side are agents I've built, minus this one. So each of these are designed and built for specific tasks and so on and so forth. And all of these agents are people, community built.
Right.
They have, I think ChatGPT has maybe a dozen made by AI. So they've made these DALL-E, data analysis, some game time, negotiator, so on and so forth. Those are the ones built by OpenAI, but there's just thousands. I think there are over 100,000 now agents
What?
that are community built. And this thing's only been out for maybe 2 weeks. I don't think it's
Oh
even
God.
2 weeks. And we have 100,000 custom agents. I mean, I built a dozen in a couple of days because of how fun it is.
Because
So
you
there's a lot
just
of
you
use
just get
cases.
into a conversation and it can help you, like it spits out the GPT, this subnet kind of thing, through that, what you showed before, this little course creation, the creation, yeah, like in that create frame, you just go through a conversation with it. Again, it's the conversational interface. That's
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
that's
So
pretty
if
amazing.
you're right, if you didn't like the way, it's built out the instructions, I could come in here and say, act mean and rude or whatever. And it will update the configuration, but just being mindful, it's going to rewrite the whole thing based off of your input, whatever you type in here, because it's going to assess, does this answer what you just said? No. Okay, then we need to recreate it. So that's a bit scary. It's happened to me once before. Sorry, I know we're trying to
Deliver
Yeah.
introduce.
all documentation like a sonnet.
Yeah.
So once you build an agent in this interface, do you already have access to an API that you could use to embed that agent elsewhere, or is that a different service?
Yep, absolutely. There's multiple ways of going about it. Let me take a look at it.
So how to embed it? How to, like, people get to it? So if it was just part of the Andamio documentation,
Didn't
it's just
want,
this.
yeah, if you didn't want this UI, you've got any open source library, for example, right?
Yeah,
And you just want to embed that agent in the documentation to that library with your branding.
right, right.
Yeah, so at least as far as open AI goes, they don't have that full experience, the tools necessary to build that out. But what happens is, once you've generated your agent and you've published it to the public, you can just grab the API link, and now you have to have a front end that supports the back end API. And there are many,
It's
many
just
tools out
basically
there.
text input and
Yeah.
listening for responses. Yeah.
Yeah, but however, it is packaged to where it knows what the parameters are. It's going to actually pass all the appropriate text that's necessary to the agent, and then whatever the agent spits back out is what you should be displaying on screen. So it is kind of like a full package, but you need some UI to interact with, and you can embed that into your website. So you've seen like these little questions on websites, which I don't see, but the pop-ups.
Right. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
the easiest way. Find a Python package or a JS package that has that conversation, and then all you're doing is pasting your API link. Done. So it is that easy, but it's not a full OpenAI product. That's you finding some way to integrate it to your.
Cool. That the API is all I need.
Yeah.
It's cool because here, I mean, any Markdown file can be dropped in, and we're writing lessons in Markdown. That's part of why we built Ondomio the way we did, is
Oh,
because we know that Markdown gives us the ability to pass that information around. So it'd be really interesting just to take the entire directory of lesson Markdown files, drop them in here, and see what that yielded.
yep.
And that's what I'm hoping to do. And in fact, I mean, I can show. I know Newman asked to see what's in the white paper document.
Oh, yeah.
But you're right. That was kind of what I'm hoping to do, is exactly that. Let's export whatever you've got and then just dump it in there, and that makes it smarter and more capable.
And especially those onboarding, first lessons, those first Markdown modules, first student learning targets are on Domio, basically, learning on Domio. So that if the GPT has access to all that and is familiar with all of that, then can support the learner. Oh, well, actually, it's sort of support the learner or support the course creator. So there's sort of two different users there.
No, that's a valid point, Newman. And I did try to in some of this documentation and in the instructions, this agent is to directly interact with the course creator, not the
Yeah,
learner. But
yeah.
it does have that perspective of what is the intent, what are the learning targets, and why. So it does try to assess the learner's perspective, but for the course creator, so that it can
So here's
educate them.
so here's the question. I mean, do you think that for everyone, do you think in next year and 5 years, like every course will have an AI agent that we interact with, like as a coach? Like how prevalent do you think it will be?
I mean, me personally, that's exactly what I plan to do, is build out a course and then build out a little button that they can click and ask a question, and it'll take them to the right module, or it'll explain it, provide additional resources, whatever. I mean, that's pretty simple to do. Um, I've heard some people talking about, well, we don't need education platforms anymore. If you got an agent, you no longer need this.
Oh,
Well, something needs to inform the agent. And if you have something structured like on Domio, that's going to be way more effective than what I've done here, which is just a giant text document, right? So tying it in with
well,
an LMS is far more effective. And in my opinion, I don't know what questions to ask this agent. I don't even know what I'm looking for until I get the outline, until I get the big picture. And that's, to me, the value of a learning management system, an education platform, is to really guide them through it. The details, the low level details are irrelevant at that point. You can find that out through the agent, but it's, how should I even be thinking about it? How should I structure my thoughts? An agent can't replace that really for you. It's the way that you're conveying that message, which I think Ondomio has done a really good job, because it's not just content, it's also what's the purpose of this content, what is getting them to really think about things, and not just giving them that detail. It's inspiring them to ask those questions. Now you have an agent that you can converse with, where those deep questions can be answered, or at least addressed. So I like that. Thank you.
I can see
yeah,
a point where there's a button in Ondomio where you can output or download an AI friendly thing that takes all of the course materials and puts it into one file that you can upload then. So you don't have to create thousands of AI. People can create them on demand based on the data they have. Can it accept PDF files or is it just text?
Yep. No, PDF, Markdown, Excel, pretty much anything and everything. Yeah. I like that though, even automating it to the point where click a button, this is your knowledge base, go deploy an agent. I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and why not? Why not? I mean, because as a course creator, I think a lot of what they do, we do, I do, is curating content. And then curating content means like maintaining it, like maintaining the GPT, like its source material so that it's up to date. Because Chat GPT is always like, I'm sorry, after 2021, I don't have this, blah blah blah. Then that becomes like a new competency for a course creator, is like maintaining the the knowledge base for the GPT, for the AI.
Yeah, I wouldn't worry too much, to be honest, about that. This is let me just minimize this. This structure is kind of like beta, but there's tons of other frameworks that do allow you to link it to a GitHub, and so it's always doing version
Oh, well,
updating.
you had said that in the beginning about like, okay, here are the websites to watch, but I'm just thinking in that big picture way of like what now is the new competency for course creation with these new tools. I mean, we I was around in instructional design when people were still really scratching their head with online video, like online, this was in 2007, and they're like, we don't think people are going to be, you know, watching Zooms and doing all this sort of stuff. And it's like, oh, no, no, actually, everybody and their sister has an instructional video on YouTube. And that's basically what TikTok is. It's like how to learn stuff. I mean, I think that the AIs really could be another sea change in educational content. And I think that's what Curtis is involved with, and really what Andamio could be a part of as well.
Yeah. I like that because one thing I've been doing is I generated a research agent where it specializes in published research papers, and I use that to help me build the knowledge base for some of these agents. So I interact with the research agent and say, find me articles around sociocracy, find me articles around polycentric governance, whatever. And then this other agent that I'm building is specialized in, say, governance models, and I just grab all those published articles, and that becomes the knowledge base. Now it actually specializes in these particular topics. That's for at beginning, it's just conversational, but you can scope that down. Now, say you're a sociocracy coach and you're a consultant, and the company's going to hire you to implement, say, sociocracy for their internal agency or their internal organization. Guide them through that and use this documentation to do that. So it gets, I mean, as much as your imagination can scrawl or go out there and crawl around, that's what is capable right now, and it's quite simple. It's not perfect, but you integrate it with a human, there's a lot of things you can do with this. Yeah.
Can we actually follow through with Ken's request in the chat? I'm very curious how this prompt would be answered by this young agent.
This is quite interesting. Okay. I love this. Ask the agent.
I don't feel so bad about sidetracking the conversation. Ken Stanton is here to save the day. We love you, Ken.
I love this. I'm curious to see what happens. Let's go back.
I hope it directs us to some learning targets about how to build my pirate spaceship.
Just a simple, I'm not even going to change much. Just how can Andamio help you become a better intergalactic space pirate. So help me, since
Yeah.
I'm the
Yeah.
due to its objectives, it may not answer it directly. Just kind of a forward warning, because my objectives were to assess what their skill level is, where they're at, their intentions. It's probably going to ask those questions first.
Good answer.
If it starts spitting out like, well, the student learning target might be, learn how to deal with 0 degree space, learn how to poop in 0 degree space, how to go broadside.
This is not a bad answer. You know,
We can certainly use the platform to craft a unique PBL course that touches and relates themes to like space exploration, astronomy, and perhaps even some fun pirated themed leadership and strategy skills. See, I do like this. This is good.
What?
Course conceptualization, learning objectives, content development. So this is, again, I've instructed it to go through outline and then stepping through. Once they get the concept, then it should step into one course conceptualization and expand on that, and then come back to learning objectives and so on and so forth. However, due to limitations of GPT, it only has a certain context window. So if this message gets buried under, say, 15 interactions, it's going to forget that the next step is learning objectives. And that is just a limitation of customization, unless I use some backend to manage memory control. But I think this is pretty good so far.
Wait a minute, Curtis. Sorry. If you could, I think that's an important point. If you could hit the rewind for like 30 seconds. I've heard of this where it sort of forgets or like say that again, if you wouldn't mind. About what happens when it's like if you ask if it has like 15 points here and then you ask it to go over point 2, or what was that again?
Yeah, so in short, there's a context window of around 4,000 tokens. I'm not entirely sure how many tokens this is. Let's say it's 500 tokens. I can have a conversation with it and kind of go back and forth. But once we've exceeded that 4,000 token window, so just imagine it's a memory that's capable of storing 4,000 tokens. It shifts. So as you keep doing more and more, that window just scrolls down. And if you're trying to reference information that's outside of that context window, so it was prior to 4,000 tokens, it doesn't know that, and it's forgotten it. It's like short-term memory. So what I tend to do is if we've completed course conceptualization, and that was a huge conversation back and forth, I'll come back here and say, now I'd like to work on learning objectives, and I'll paste this because it produced it, and that will remind it where we're at, what we're doing, what our purpose is. But memory is an issue. And there are solutions, but they're not built into this UI. That's a backend thing where you actually store everything, the entire conversation. And then when you call ChatGPT, you sort of remind it and reintroduce it into its context window. So there are solutions, but again, it's just not here in this interface.
Okay. Thank you for going back over that. I think I understand it now. That what will happen if it does something out of context? Will it just say, oh, I don't remember that, or what are you talking about? Or
it may hallucinate. It depends on your instructions.
Oh,
it may try
crap.
to hallucinate it, or if your instructions say do not hallucinate, ask questions, which I did for Andamio because I don't want it hallucinating.
Could you go back into that instructions? Because that, I think, is a real, for me anyway. I do want to go over the pirate thing too, but like you just said, hey, like if don't hallucinate when you don't know something. Where exactly did you?
Yeah,
it was hallucinating when it said Andamio has built-in quizzes, but we'll let that slide.
Oh, you're right.
Exactly.
You're right.
Yeah, exactly. Trust, don't verify.
It could be that it read assessment, and then it assumed quizzes. It's really hard to tell behind its thought processes.
Yeah,
it was in the
or assume.
Yeah, you know what? It looks like I've iterated on this thing a lot, and it may have gotten removed accidentally somehow, because it was in my objectives to instead of hallucinating, always verify with the user that the information being conveyed is accurate to their intent, aligns with their intent, and you will not provide information that's not included in this knowledge base. That was how I phrased it, but it seems to be gone. So sorry, Newman, I can't show you that. Iterations, if you don't have a proper, version control, it's easy to lose things.
Oh yeah, sure.
And Mix had a hand up a second ago too, as
Yeah,
we
I
were
saw that.
over there.
Wonder, most of chat GPTs and of course these agents fall into this maybe pitfall of generalization. Like instead of giving you a very specific and detailed answer, they will try to give you abstract or just give you something so it is not say I cannot do that. I wonder, is there any instruction or have you tried to tell that if you don't know something, just say that I don't know. As simple as that. Like, don't try to answer something.
I used to build my prompts that way. To be honest, yes, you're right. And if you don't know something, say I don't know. And it depends on the purpose you're using that agent for. If it's meant to provide you information and like as an artifact, provide you information, you never want it hallucinating. You always want it to say, I don't know. I don't know the answer to your question. However, when in this example, when you're using it more like a guide or a coach, you want it to not just stop that, right? That progressive conversation. You want it to maybe inquire some clarifying questions so that it can then go and find it, or it'll offer you, hey, I can search the web. Does that sound like a good solution? It's trying not to stop the conversation. It wants to continue it. So I don't use that type of language when it's meant to be a guide or a coach. If I wanted to just produce artifacts, then yes, never hallucinate, always tell me I don't know. And then I have to determine how to continue that conversation. But as a coach, I wanted to constantly continue that conversation.
And based on your experience, Curtis, the hallucination normally happens when the GPT surpassed that memory token limitation or threshold. Oh, no, it might happen as soon as possible. Like maybe even the first conversation, it might happen. Like hallucination happen when the context become blurry or no?
So, I mean, I'd say yes, but for different reasons. Like you're saying, if you run out of the context window and then your comment is, okay, let's continue where we left off, and that fell outside of the context window, it will most likely try to hallucinate where it thinks you left off and not ask you. So that's one way. Sorry.
So it cannot ask you that, hey, please remind me. But I just forgot.
It can.
Please remind me.
So it can, and I'm trying to. I love these questions, but I also don't want to take it, way out of context. It can, but so every word inside instructions is a token, and therefore you're eating into your context window. So if I doubled this, then that's twice the amount of tokens just for the instructions, and not even the input, the user input, or the response, the result.
Oh, I see.
So you want to really refine your instructions as much as possible. But that is something you can add in there, that if it's unclear or you don't know, you ask and inquire. But honestly, if you like, all the questions that you're asking, very valid, but you've got to build it out. And just what you're asking about is already a good chunk. Making sure you
in
don't
Cardano, we are
hallucinate.
used to this. For Bluetooth smart contract, we have these 16 kilobyte. So we are not
Exactly like
unfamiliar
that.
with what should we put on data and this user and that. But interesting. I thought that for the agent, there are more token, but that 4,000 is just for the conversation. But now, okay, see.
Yeah. Looks like my page got refreshed, but We still have this conversation. Oh, and I'm sorry, you were talking about hallucination. The other ways I see it hallucinating quite often is when you start getting deeper into level of details. So as James brought up about the quizzes, that's a granular level of detail that maybe I didn't include enough of that into the text document. So it began to hallucinate because you were asking it for certain details that it just doesn't know, and it starts to hallucinate. Now that's to me subjective whether or not you want that in your agent or not. So for instance, James caught the quizzes. That's just general learning management system information. You can say don't use that, but then it's probably very often going to say, I don't know what you're talking about, to a lot of the things that you ask it. Or do you want to give it some degree of freedom to take the internet's knowledge and fill in those gaps, right? To me, it's subjective on whether or not you want to include that.
But Curtis, have you thought about creating a very small network of agents? Like each agent
That's what these
just
are.
for
Yeah.
one of these points, and then there is another agent which manage those 10 agents, which they are special. Like instead of having 4,000, by adding 10 different agents, now we have 40,000, and we will give them more depth, like a special agent, and then another agent running all this show, or I don't know, all these different agents. Or no, there is
Yes.
limitation.
No, that's what these are. A lot of these. So, for instance, like Goal Conductor, I created that agent which oversees goals and objectives as like a project manager style effort, and it will call on agents that it needs to do, and that's all built into this one. But I can tell it to call in and say, Insight Blogger, once you've achieved your objective, turn that into a blog post and post it. I can feed that into Workshop Wizard and say, now produce, a workshop surrounding these topics, and here's the information. So what you're asking for 100%, and the technology does exist, just not within the OpenAI ecosystem yet. That's that whole, they're talking about launching and releasing that in 1 year's time. That's the autonomous agents, but they're using this as a test bed. Let's see, before it gets out of control, before the GPTs go haywire, let's first test these individual GPTs. And then in a year's time, we're going to release the autonomous agents, which is what you're talking about, the swarms. And then in the chat, there's references to what's being talked. Auto GPT. I personally just started playing with AutoGen for this. I can call on these API endpoints, and then in AutoGen, I'm creating a framework of how these agents interact. So you can have a project manager, a developer, and a coach, whatever, and you're creating those relationships, and then just let it go. Let it, as a swarm, act as a team to obtain your objective, whatever that is. So that is there. It's out. A lot of AI developers are using it, but it's not to the degree of, hey, let's point and click and create a swarm. You have to have a back end or a platform that you've built that on until GPT does release it. When they do, that's your everyday user can create swarms and not have to know anything about AI. Like that's the level of power they're trying to release it. Yeah.
Exciting and scary.
Yeah. I'm thinking of this pirate. Ken, were you? I thought you were just joking, but this is actually a pretty good, you know, because then all of a sudden the problems and the projects are like, what would a space pirate, come up across? Like what are the strategies that it would do?
I like the way it worded it too, where it's okay. Well, so then you need to know a bit about space exploration and astronomy. Obviously, you're the captain of a ship, and you need to know your way around. But then it also talks about leadership and strategy skills from the point of view of a pirate. I thought that was kind of cool.
And James, is this sort of like is this explicitly stated in because the only thing that it's trained on is the white paper. Is this in the white paper as far as like the
Let
methodology
me,
for.
if I can share just real quick, because it's actually a little bit more. I compiled it. This is what I've scraped so far. What is Endamio and a bit of its description to help the agent. An introduction to Endamio, breaking down. This is all your guys' documentation. This is the PBL framework itself document, and then how is it organized and constructed? What are SLTs? Why SLTs, lessons, so on and so forth. So see how far I'm not even halfway. It's more than just a white paper, but it's
Okay,
not
okay.
everything. So sorry, I just want to clarify. That's all.
Huh. Ooh, okay. Did you put all this together for this talk, or you've been working on this before? Oh, I remember there was we had talked about this maybe in a previous meeting about an agent to do documentation and coaching for
Yeah,
Andamio.
I built this probably 2 weeks ago. I honestly, I haven't really come back to it since, because I'm waiting for maybe more documentation. Um, yeah, I kind of went down. I tend to go down rabbit holes because when I try to do this, I built an agent that can scrape the web and create documents so that I can inject them into here, similar to what Nori was saying.
Shifting slightly, there's something really interesting going on with the way these different agents are being displayed in that pro interface. And it connects to what Mix is saying, right? How long until another GPT agent uses Andamio to issue a project and help it become better and creates better courses? This is what we're trying to achieve with Andamio, is to say all of these individual instances of courses being created, sharing learning targets as the interface. That's the API between courses, is the fact that everybody writes learning targets. And now everybody has that shared understanding. Okay, I don't know everything that they're teaching over there, but at least I can read their learning targets and kind of see what the gist of that thing was. I can see if there's overlap between our courses. I can see if there's a sequence between our courses. And over time, where might an agent like this become extraordinarily helpful is if it can help you as you're starting to build a course, see who else has built courses with similar learning targets. And then where does the on-chain data become more valuable? Well, the throughput of this course, right? We can measure, say, the ratio between how many people minted a learner token and how many finished a particular module in a given course. And that can be a metric that maybe there will be faults, right? I'm always hesitant to think about how we measure things or would weight, right, paths on this network. But you can imagine, hey, more people finished this module about that learning target than this other one, right? And so now we can start to see some weighted support for people who are building new courses. We can help them to not reinvent things. Oh, how to connect your wallet to pre-prod, that's been done already. Here's 10 options, right, for how to do that part. But that new thing that you're teaching people how to do, that's unique, right? And so having that kind of guidance and seeing the value of that network in that way, and even getting to the point of, these multi-agent frameworks that are coming our way, I think it's a really interesting parallel. And I'm excited to see both. All I can hope is that even though we have these agents, we're still able to kind of reckon the value of getting together and solving novel problems together, right? And if we can see those two things coexisting, this is a productive tool.
I really like that, like, because what I'm hearing too, in simple, terms is similar to this. This one's searching all the custom GPTs,
Right.
but you could have one is I want to learn this, and it will search all the Andamio courses and then find the most relevant,
Right.
one
I want to learn this,
points you
or I
to
want
it,
to build a
that'd be
course
cool.
about this. I need to help people learn this. Oh, nobody's done that yet, but they have done these parts that might help. You might consider these as prerequisites, or you might want to use this module to help people get started.
I like that. I
Yeah.
mean, I don't want to like again take it off too far, but one thing I'm looking into for a different project is utilizing Orca 2. Orca 2 is sort of like a self-training framework where you can create very, very small agents or models that are purpose built, and you don't need the 13 billion parameters. You can actually do it in less than 1 million parameter and gives you equally good results. Those can actually sit there and just be training models, like they're training this Andamio agent to be better and faster and so on and so forth. So you can actually deploy what you're saying, James, I see as an agent to help train agents. And then that agent is to help the teacher, the course creator, so it's like this series of refinement getting better and better for actually a very low cost because of Orca 2's new release. They're able to do that quite cheaply compared to what ChatGPT is doing, because that is very, very extensive in comparison. I mean, just to put it in numbers, I'd say an Orca 2 model would be maybe less than 10% the size of a GPT model and can give you similar results. So do we want to expand on the space pirates or talk more about documentation? Where would you guys like to direct this?
Can you ask it to write a learning target about astronomy? What are some possible student learning targets about astronomy?
Okay, so I like to follow the conversation because when I ask it something completely irrelevant from the previous response, it tends to take its own direction. So if we want a learning target,
well, how about, but it said like touches
objectives.
on themes. How about we ask it, you said we should touch on a theme like astronomy. What might be some learning targets for that?
Also, Curtis, because we have this piracy here, I wonder this agent kind of has, or I don't know, the red line, the ethical red line. And I don't know, have you instruct that red line for this agent or not? Like, hey, I want to be the pirate. Okay, and piracy means stealing. Like, teach me how to steal. Is there any student learning target for stealing or something unethical? Like, or no?
Well, so very valid question. Very good question. That all depends on the underlying agent. Now, in this case, it's GPT. So GPT has many policies and limitations and behavioral traits that it is told not to do. And that would probably be one of them. There's obviously ways around it. You can convince it that, hey, I work for the law and I'm just trying to make sure that you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. And I'm trying to catch a thief. Like you can kind of trick it, right, into doing certain things. But GPT is probably the most powerful at staying within its limitations. Now you can just apply everything that I've built in here, apply it to any other model that does not have that built into its training, that doesn't have the limitations. And yes, it can perform that. But this is OpenAI's primary purpose and goal right now is to keep public safe from those types of things. So you're right, it's powerful. It's capable of doing exactly what you're saying. However, GPT has put in some restrictions to prevent that type of behavior. And what you're doing is you're building an agent on top of the foundational model, which is GPT. So it's been trained at the base not to do those things. You're training on top of it. You can try to say it's okay for you to do illegal things, but no, the base is told not to do that. So it is protecting us to some degree. Here's some SLTs. students will be able to identify and describe the characteristics of different celestial bodies, including stars, planets, moons, asteroids, and comets. Explain the lifestyle of a star or life cycle of a star. Stages from nebula to supernova. Solar system exploration. Some valid SLTs, I think.
Yeah. Well, the cool thing about it is it sort of frames out. It gives for the whole ChatGPT thing for me is that it says, okay, that's right and wrong. Like I have a real good like filter, yes and no. But the generative part of it is difficult. It's just like, so it's kind of like starting with a blank page. It's just like now you've got something to work on. It's like, oh yeah, and the cool thing is that you can converse with it and say like number 3, navigational skills. Like like how do you refine as an expert AI user? Like, do you know some tips on how to like refine one of these or how to speak to it to craft it, or do you just take it from here? Like, what's the next?
No, I think you're right. I mean, it's hard to answer because the intent of these agents is so that everybody can converse with it and achieve their objective, their goals, without having to be a prompt engineer. But the better you are at prompting, the better the results you're going to get, or at least you're going to get there quicker. So for me, every single time I interact with it, I'm treating it as if I'm prompt engineering that thing. I'm trying to state my objective, potentially the direction or the path I want to get to that objective, and maybe some relevant information that it said. So I try to combine those into a good prompt each time, every single time I go back and forth. But like you said, actually, it's crucial that we're playing that part of it. It may not be filling in the details for you right away, but it's giving you instead of a blank canvas, it's giving you a bit of a framework, and you're using your internal filter to decide whether what right or wrong, or does that even deserve to be placed into this framework. And so the way I like to use it is help me build out this stuff, and then I direct it for the content, and then it helps generate the content. And again, I pass it through my filter to say whether it's right or wrong. So I'm still being the orchestrator in between certain stages, and I'm not asking for it to do end to end. Some people want it to be end to end, and it can, but everything that comes out is going to be either generic, abstract, or hallucinating. I'm trying to apply, right? Like you're going to gate that at certain stages, and that's what I try to do throughout. I see Mix has his hand up.
Yeah, actually, regards to this exact response we got, I'm wondering the depth of the depth level of understanding of this agent or ChatGPT. Like, for example, we have a canonical order of these SLTs. I wonder, does really this agent understood that first a student should the SLT 1, then the second, then the third and fourth and fourth and so on and so forth? Or no, it just produce bunch of SLTs. There is no order. There is no understanding that a student should go through this step in order to learn. For example, on SLT number 2 and 3. But SLT number 2 is solar, I think the solar system exploration. And the SLT number 3 is navigation. But my understanding, first you have to navigate, then explore. So I wonder, is it possible to give this instruction or no? I mean, maybe we are asking too much. Like within that 4,000 context, does the GPT have enough understanding to give something meaningful? Like,
So
like the level of hardness, all this. Go ahead.
I do. I like that. I like that question. And no, because right, it's just trying to satisfy what you asked it, and it's going through a series of layers. First, the instructions that I gave it has it satisfied those instructions? Then the previous user interactions, which was give me an SLT, all it's trying to do is satisfy what it's being asked. If at no point did it ask, did we ask for it to structure it in a certain order, so it's not going to do that. But like you just said, well, I don't know, is there a theme? Is there a blah blah? Well, let's ask it. Does this list of SLTs go in order of learning priorities and dependencies, or is it just a totality list? Can you list them in order of stacking learning concepts? I'm now directing at a new objective. Based on the result it gave me, I'm going to direct it. Now, can it do it automatically? Sure, I could put that in the instructions, but it might be extensive. It might not be what everybody wants. Yeah, I don't know. That's kind of a challenging point, but I'm curious to see what it said. Let's arrange the SLTs for the astronomy themed course in sequence that builds up upon each concept progressively. This order will help students develop a foundational understanding before moving on to the more complex topics. So understanding celestial objects and a bit more detail around each point, observational strategy. So I think the order, if we take a look, the order is the same order with that intent that it's stacking up these foundational knowledge concepts.
The order is changed. Navigation is now behind the solar system exploration.
Oh, so 3 and 4. Let's see, navigational still 3 and 4. That may just be coincidence that they're still in the same order, or it applied the same order and tried to do it by satisfying my request, listing them in order of stacking learning concepts. I mean, it seems to have actually done what I asked. Then you have basics of celestial objects to provide a solid foundation. And then from there, they can explore. As the course progresses, ensuring that students are well prepared for each subsequent topic. How does this order align? So now it's actually asking, do you like this? Do you need further, or can we move on type of thing? It's very back and forth. It's not a click a button. Here's the topic or the title of the course. Now go build it. It's really expecting an interaction back and forth. And personally, I prefer that because that means I'm getting what I'm asking for and I know what I'm getting, versus a generic thing. We can automate this, but your results may vary type of thing. I like Newman's comment. I want to take this course too. How do I learn how to be a space pirate?
Yeah.
It's making me excited.
Yeah. But I also have to eat before my next thing. Thank you all so much. We'll see you next time. I appreciate you.
Yeah, I know we're starting to wind down. So I think continuing to experiment with this sounds good. I guess the thing I'm struggling with is what are the possible drawbacks of like feeding it data too early? And so I don't want to race to get half-built documentation into this thing. So if we can start to have a regular cadence of saying, okay, these parts are ready, whether it's the JavaScript documentation or course modules as they roll out. It'll be really exciting to see that. But personally, I would find it stressful to say, okay, let's feed it all this half-baked stuff right away. Because every time I read a misrepresentation, I'd be worried about it.
Yeah. I think all AI is definitely an iterative process that there may not actually be an end goal. Like you're constantly optimizing, or you just get it to good enough, right? And then release it out to the public. So I totally agree. I don't feel satisfied with its ability. It's pretty darn good, but there's gaps, there's missing pieces, like you mentioned, James, in the documentation itself. And there's also one other aspect I wanted to include, which was more of like an FAQ. this is a strategy that I have found very helpful as well. Just crafting an FAQ document in any agent that you're using, but you create an FAQ where you're actually crafting the question and then you're crafting the answer. And what that's doing is capturing tone, personality, communication style, and commonly answered questions. So it's allowing it to then communicate in the same way that you would communicate, because you've actually provided it some of that. So here, that I think you've kind of already got that through your playgrounds and all of the other meetings that you've had. I'm sure somewhere in there is a bunch of questions that people asked, and the way that you answered it. If we could just scrape that and gather that, aggregate it into a single document, that could be quite powerful too. So let's see, more directly answer your question. Yeah, right now this is not public. I'm only sharing it with those that are in these communities. If anybody wants, we can work on something together. But a cadence for updating it, that's totally up to you, James. I won't pull any triggers. I won't make it any public without first getting in the same boat as you and where you lie, getting your feedback.
Thanks. Yeah. And we've got a whole team here who it'll be really good to align. John, what do you think? Hey.
Hi. It's excellent stuff. Thanks, Curtis, for putting this together. Really good. I was just more and more as that conversation went on, I was thinking there is so much more nuance to education than you realize at first glance. So this restrictive approach to education is actually one of the most important. So, we're talking about sequential learning. So if you don't have the background, then you can't go on to the next step, so on and so forth. And this is crucial. So, having and maybe not so much for the course creator, but certainly for the end goal courses themselves, that sequential learning and how you can train a GPT to actually take students through that sequence sounds like a pretty hefty challenge. But then also, realistically, the actual quality feedback that is needed is metrics at the end of a student's course. So, did this student learn the targets successfully, and to what degree? And what did the GPT say to the student in response to questions that actually produced the fastest, best, most deep learning? Do you know what I mean? So that whole feedback at the end of the education process, the assessment, the review, the qualitative assessments, how do we get that back into GPTs to then reinforce that human learning, machine learning cycle? And then you probably have some ideas already, but what sort of format would that best take? Can it take tabular data of student grades, or does it need to be more language based? So feedback, human, verbose feedback from students and from teachers at the end of the course. I'm waffling now. Say something.
Yeah, I feel like you're getting into a bit of the swarm talk. Like if you want this to be a course creator and specialize in course creation, it may not specialize in assessment, right, of the courses or of the learners, and that may be a different agent that's specifically designed to consume metrics or feedback or whatever, and then produce tangible artifacts. Or so yeah, to me it's a multi-stage type of thing. But I just asked it kind of based off of what you were saying, give me metrics or at least options of metrics that we can measure how well the SLTs were learned by the learner. And it's given me some of it generic though, because this conversation needs to go through those scales, those scopes. And right now it knows very little. I literally just said, give me a course about space pirates. And we went through a little bit, but it's giving me high level stuff. So quizzes, testing identification and description of their slow bodies, or a project, having them create a visual guide or presentation, so on and so forth. So good ideas, but maybe not exactly what you need. And as you progress through this comment, so if it's identified, if you've identified what the SLTs are, what the modules are, what the all the different components, if you started to classify and identify those, then that feeds into, if I ask the same question later in the conversation, it's going to give me different results because it'll have more context to reference it. But as far as initial question, I think this is pretty decent. Create a visual guide that's the life cycle of a star, or well, that shows that yes, the learner knows what they're talking about because they were able to do that. There's quite a few here. Yeah, sorry, I did I address everything?
Yeah, no, I think that's it's really good. And I suppose that again just takes me to, once that feedback comes back from the students, from the teachers, does the GPT learn for the next iteration of the student course to amend its answers? And you know,
I see. No, not necessarily in this case. Yeah, because we're not training. I'm sorry.
Yeah. And each student that goes through, so yeah, again, from the student's perspective, as it goes through the course, that is a prompted learning process that it will be unique to that particular student's experience.
I see.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't quite get that the first time. So GPT is quite limited in its capability, but when you can stack other technologies and platforms behind the scenes, it becomes far more powerful. So right now, this is just an Ondomio course creator agent, and it's not really going to learn. It's never going to improve or optimize unless I optimize the prompt framework or the knowledge-based documentation. Like that's how you would optimize it. It's not necessarily continuing to learn. However, like I said before with Orca 2, you could actually put in an agent that's assessing how well this agent performed, how well the students actually learned the content, make a far more powerful setup,
Right.
which is two agents kind of, or even more than two, but working together.
Yeah, so this would almost be like the compiled latest version of the course creator. And that will grow and iterate over time, but it will have different releases that do a better job. And
I like that.
Yeah. And again, because it just strikes me that a teacher knows when to answer a question and when not to. Like James is always withholding an answer to improve the student's desire for finding out that answer, and that takes you in a completely different way. So, will the GPTs learn that that no, be able to the ability to say no to a certain question at a certain point of the learning cycle and stuff like that? It'll be it's fascinating to see it start and grow. Thank you.
I like that. It's I still think humans play a critical role when interacting with AI, and even in the learning of AI. Just as an example, this gave a bunch of ways to assess metrics or ways to measure their learning, but it specifically spelled out that, look, we're using quizzes, practical exercises, written assignments, and presentations as that medium, because it's just pulling from a list. But if you've identified, well, actually written assignments or project-based style learning or presentations is the thing we like, you can provide that feedback, and now it's rebuilt the content around yours. To me, that's the human element. But where AI does the best is assessing its ability to actually get to that quicker. That humans aren't really good at. Let the AIs do their internal assessment, whereas you're assessing certain bits and providing feedback. That is what gets used as input in the AI assessment, let's call it. So to me, humans play a critical role, and AI is better at crunching numbers than we are. Yeah.
Yeah, it's almost like they're the eager to please puppy at the moment, and I just want to give you the answer you're looking for, no matter what, whether that's best for you or not. It's great. Thank you.
Yeah.
That was fun.
Sorry, James, you're probably trying to close up. I see people hopping.
All good. No, it's Tuesday's meeting day, I know, for a lot of people. So we'll call this one for now, but say absolutely to be continued. Curtis, thanks for starting this. And to everybody, see you soon. Thanks for hanging out on a Tuesday.
Thanks, James.